When you don't have 20 minutes to watch a full review, when you're not looking for a how to play or an hour-long playthrough, and let's be honest, when the boxes are a little smaller too, that's why we have 6 small box games for you. Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and this is a 6 small box games review video. I will be going over 6, well, small and I guess medium-sized boxes over here, and giving you my brief thoughts and opinions on each one. Links and timestamps to everything down below. Well, timestamps to everything down below. I don't always do links for these small box game reviews, but just head over to Board Game Geek, punch in the title, and you'll get the link right there. That's another opportunity if I don't do links, but there are still timestamps. Anyways, we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go ahead and go through these games. As usual, I will be going through them in order of my least favorite to my most favorite, not in terms of box size, but least to most favorite, starting with Allegra, which does not bode well for Allegra because, frankly, I did not like this game. I really didn't like Allegra. Like, this one over here, it's the general concept of the game is you're trying to gather sets of cards into your own little grid. Players are going to be playing with a grid of cards, and you share one column with the player to your left. So you're sharing a column that also belongs to the other player, which gives a degree of collaborativeness, but also just doesn't really add anything to the gameplay, at least not for me. Then you're drafting cards, you're taking cards either from the deck or from the discard pile to put into your grid in order to line up cards of the same number, which then means you can get rid of those cards, and you want less cards in your grid. Less cards means less points. Points are bad. That's the basic idea of the game. The actual gameplay to me was boring, like completely boring. It felt like draw a card and see if it works. Then there's an element of sharing that, if anything, took away from the gameplay for me. And so for me, I feel like I tried reading the rules like 3 times to make sure I wasn't doing anything wrong, because I bounced hard off of this one. I will say, someone that I was playing with it did say that it's similar to another game they've played that I don't remember the name of it, but if you're like, oh, this sounds like another game where you're just trying to line up cards in rows and columns and get rid of them, someone said it reminds them of another more mass market game. This feels like it might have been a gamified version of that. I don't know, I didn't play the original, but for me, I did not enjoy Allegra at all. It's not a bad game by any metrics, but for me personally, this would be a 2 out of 5. I have no interest in playing this again. It did not work for me at all. Moving on, and slightly up the ladder, let's go to Top Tier. Now, Top Tier is my second least favorite, but it comes with a bit of a catch here, and this is one of those times where the rating matters, but also the words I say matter as well. Honestly, the words usually matter more than the rating. The rating is there for people who want everything put into a square little box, which I'm happy to provide when I can, but words do matter. In fact, when it comes to Top Tier, words are everything in this game, because in Top Tier, you are ranking things using that, like, I don't know, is it an internet meme or whatever it is, videos people do where they have S tier, A, B, C, D, and you're putting everything into the tiers. How good is something at a tier? Specifically in Top Tier, what you're going to do is you're going to have cards where players write down any names they want. It could be your brother, it could be your friend, it could be George Washington, it could be Baby Yoda. It could be absolutely any person in history, real or imagined, someone you know personally, someone you don't know personally, someone completely fictional, someone that doesn't even talk the English language. Any of those opportunities, whatever you want, write it down on a card, or more specifically, write it down on 8 different cards. Then you're going to draw the category. The category might be, let's think, what was the last category I played with? The last category was who is likely to have the most unread emails in their inbox. And at that point, the player who's the judge of the round is effectively going to look through those 8 names and say, oh, well, you know, Darth Vader would have a ton of unread emails because he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He doesn't need to respond to emails, so all his emails are unread. I'm going to put Darth Vader in S tier. Maybe that's your ranking. Alternatively, maybe you're like Darth Vader likes order, and order means that the emails would all be read. You could rank it however you want, but what you do give as hints to the other players is you have these 8 tokens representing the 8 cards with no numbers on them, and you say from those 8 cards, how many went into each tier. So for example, you might say, hey, I put 3 into S tier. S tier is the best. It's the best at that category. I put 2 into A tier, 1 into D tier, and 2 into C tier. Whatever, I don't even know if that adds up to 8. Basically, you show what the breakdown of where the people went. That's the only clue the players get. Then the players try to figure out where they think you may have put these various people in order to score points in the game. That's the basic principle of the game, and it's actually fun. Like I said, listen to my words here, this is a fun experience. I've played this multiple times. I've had fun every single time, with a caveat. The first caveat is I do find the frequent coming up with names is much more challenging than I would like. Now granted, the game does say feel free to reuse those names amongst different cards, but frankly, my group found that less fun to do. Like sure, you can use the exact exact same 8 names with a different card. It could be most likely take over the galaxy. And now Darth Vader is definitely S tier, and, you know, Mickey Mouse a little bit less so. So you could reuse the same names, and that does take away from the writing up of the names, but again, it is a little less fun. A better solution, honestly, is like proxying out 3 or 4 names each time, so there's some new overturn, and you're constantly dealing with somewhat of a new set. But honestly, we found that we almost prefer to just come up with names, but then that slows you down. It's actually harder to come up with 8 random names than you would think at any given point, unless you're specifically going for theme. If you're going for theme, if you're like 8 superheroes, that's pretty quick, but then trying to figure out which superhero is most likely to have your unread emails can take away from some of the fun. Like Captain America or Iron Man, who has more unread emails? That becomes a little less interesting than trying to figure out Captain America versus Mickey Mouse, if that makes sense. So for me, the biggest fallback of this game that held it back for me is the fact that, first of all, like some party games, it's going to have a degree of repetition with those categories because there's only so many ways you could mix things together. I prefer party games that mix things like Codenames or So Clover, where you have categories that are put together in a way that every game is different. Because you have a single category card, it's always going to be that single category card. But really, the having to write down names held it back for me. I'd almost wish there was a box full of, 200 names in here, and honestly, it looks like this box is full. It's not. This box has like this many cards, and then some cards on the top, and then a big thing taking up space in the box. It's not full of cards at all, because you're writing all the names down yourself. So I like the concept. The execution has some things that hold it back for me. It's a game that I would not turn down playing, but it's hardly great enough. In its own, it's kind of more mass market in its appeal, and then having to write down those names every time definitely held it back. A 3 out of 5. I'm realizing I'm spending too much time talking about these individual games. Let's go ahead and speed it up a drop. To that end, the next few are going to be hard, because I know what my best one is, but the next 3 all have the same ranking. Let's go with Boop the Halls, which is probably my least favorite from the rest 3, but again, the next 3 do have the same score, and that score for all of these next 3 is going to be a 3.5 out of 5. Boop the Halls is basically Boop, but with a Christmas theme. If you've played Boop, it's a little game of placing cats onto a little board and then trying to line up your kittens into rows, but the problem is every time you put something, it boops the other things. So trying to get 3 kittens in a row, whenever you place a kitten, it boops the kitten, that seems impossible. The good news is kittens won't boop if they're already in the way of another kitten. In other words, if I have a kitten here and a kitten here and I boop, you can't boop if there's nowhere to boop to. So it's all about setting up these lines where you can't boop things because they have nowhere else to go, and that takes some time and some planning. But you're working against the other players because every time you place kittens down, you boop your kittens and their kittens, until eventually you create a line of cats. Then you start booping them into getting a line of cats. That's ultimately how you win the game, booping into a line of cats, which is where we get to Boop the Halls. Boop the Halls takes that core game concept and it gives you a more tiered structure, which doesn't actually have a gameplay impact. It's the same basic game, but it does give you ornaments that are slowly crashing down and falling, and you are trying to juggle that as well as you play through the game. So now you're trying to boop without booping an ornament off and slowly losing the game that way. So it adds a nice twist to a good abstract game. I enjoy Boop. I enjoy Boop the Halls. I think I like Boop the Halls more than Boop. I don't think I've played Boop yet. Boop would be the Halloween one of the game. I haven't played that one yet, but I have played Boop and Boop the Halls. Boop the Halls gives you slightly more thinkiness to the experience because of the juggling of the ornaments, but overall, it is a good abstract game that I have fun with. Not my favorite. It's a good one. It's a 3.5 out of 5. From there, we have Letter Jam. Letter Jam is a party game that I love the concept, and I always find the execution to be more complicated than I would like. This is one of those games where I feel like it's got a almost mass market party game appeal. Let's pull it out with a group of people and let's just play this word game together. But then I find in practice it's always more work to explain than I would like. The concept of Letter Jam is you know the letters of the other players, you don't know your own letters. And so you're trying to give words to the table that will help other players figure out what their letters are, because you have some degrees of information. Let's say your letter is an L. I might go ahead and to the rest of the table, I might try to spell the word waffle, assuming I have the words to spell the word waffle. And then, well, let's pretend your letters, L's fine. And so I give other people the letters, I give someone a 1, someone else a 2, a 3, a 4. I give them the numbers of the letters corresponding to the word waffle. And you, because waffle, W-A-F-F-L, you would get the letter 5. So now if you're looking at the rest of the table, pretend you're a player right now and you're looking at the rest of the table and you see W-A-F-F blank E. Okay, what do you think your letter can be? How many possible opportunities are there for your letter to be? Similarly, someone else at the table is looking at that exact same structure and they're seeing W-A blank blank L-E, because they got the F. Their word is F, which means you use their letter twice, so they have 3 and 4 in front of them. So again, they can see W-A blank blank F-E, or L-E, L-E. And so how many things can fit into that? So you've just helped give people a lot of information. Similarly, the person with the W is looking at A, they're looking at blank, A, FFLE. How many words are there? Is that taffle, baffle? Baffle actually works. So they might write down for themselves that they might have the word waffle. They also might have the word baffle. Is that how you spell baffle? I'm not actually sure. Anyways, that's the basic idea of the game. You're trying to give people clues to the game, to the words in front of them. The problem is the entire scoring mechanism is a little more convoluted than I'd like. The gameplay in general is a little more complicated than I'd like, and in general it has this word game with a whole element, and there's a whole endgame aspect where you're ultimately trying to figure out all the 5 letters in front of you through constructing of a word. It takes a cute little concept that is fun, and the whole thing is more convoluted than I would like. And so I really do enjoy Letter Jam. I have fun playing Letter Jam, and I rarely, if ever, play it because those elements kind of hold it back. It ends up being something I wish were more accessible, but in practice is less accessible than I would think it is based on the theme. So the gameplay on its own, like if you're looking at my enjoyment of the gameplay, it's a 4 out of 5. But I'm not ranking it based on my enjoyment of the gameplay. I'm ranking it based on the full picture, and I find that I rarely, if ever, pull this out because of the fact that it's always a bit more, like I know when I'm teaching new players, it's like, hey guys, here's this cute little word game that is so much more complicated to learn than you might think. But if we power through it, then we'll have a good time. And there are so many other party games that are just better than that. So I like the gameplay, I like the game, kind of holds itself back in a small way. 3.5 out of 5. From there, we're going to go to Goodcritters. Goodcritters is almost delightfully charming, well not almost, it is delightfully charming. Goodcritters is basically Junta, if I recall correctly, but shorter. The basic premise of the game is you are a boss, or at least one player in the game is a boss, and you just went on a heist and now you're splitting the loot. And so you, as the boss, start handing out the loot to the various players. You're going to draw loot cards off the deck, and you'll divvy up how you want. The catch is that players have to vote on whether they accept the divvying up of the loot. So players have the opportunity, they have an action card that allows them to vote to reject or approve the vote, and that the problem there is you might be thinking, okay great, I'm going to go ahead and give out loot, and I'm going to give it to everyone except Brian. Why not Brian? Because frankly, if you give everyone the same amount of loot, it's a very boring game. And so Brian is getting cut out. I don't know, maybe he taught you Letter Jam and you didn't like to teach. Whatever the reason is, Brian's getting cut out. The good news is, because you've given it to like 3 other people, let's say you're playing a 5-player game, so there's yourself, the 3 other people, Brian, you're like, guys, if we all just vote yes, we all get the loot, Brian doesn't, and that will start off the chaos of this game. The problem is the action cards you have are not just voting yes or voting no. That would be much simpler, and also much more boring. Rather, you have action cards like skimming. You can take a piece of loot off the top. So for example, if I'm like, yes, absolutely, I will vote yes, but instead of voting yes, I vote to skim, which means you all agree on the vote, we all get, Brian gets screwed out of his money, but on the other hand, I get an extra loot card drawn from the top of the deck. Look at me, I'm better 1-up than all the other players. It gets more complicated because you can vote to rob from a player. I sit there and say, Brian sits there and says, hey, by the way, just so we're on the same page, you guys can either go ahead with this or not, but I know you, Charlie, and Charlie, you were the one who was looking at your phone while I taught Letter Jam, and so Charlie, I'm going to rob from you. And they place their marker in front of him, and they say they're going to rob him. They don't actually have to rob him, but they do have to place their marker in front of him. And so they sit there and they say, okay, great, well, if they're robbing his loot, well, now Charlie's going to have 1 less. Brian will at least walk away with something if the vote passes. On the other hand, if Brian is trying to rob, that makes it even more likely that the vote will go through because you do need to have people actually objecting to the vote. On the other hand, you also have Charlie can sit there and say, well, thanks for telling me you're going to rob me, I'm going to guard myself. And so you have this dynamic that players have to choose whether they want to guard, rob, skim, vote yes, or vote no, and the combination of all these different things as far as what players are doing is going to lead to complete and total chaos until you go through the entire deck of cards, well, until you get to the endgame trigger in the deck of cards. It is a lot of fun, it is a lot of chaos, but it's one of those games that very much is about the dynamic of the table. There's no rhyme or reason. This isn't a game where you out-strategize yourself to victory. This is a game of just pure chaos. If you've played games like Junta, or Cash and Guns for that matter, this has that kind of just chaotic appeal, and it distills it down into a shorter time frame. It does require a higher player count, so this is like, I think it's 4 to 8 if not mistaken, and that makes sense. You do need a certain number of votes for this to be engaging, but it does make for a very entertaining party game. Again, don't buy too much into the strategy. Sit down, have fun, think of it as a party game, have a good time, this complete chaos to it. Ultimately, I like Goodcritters, it's a 3.5 out of 5. It doesn't rank higher because, again, it is more about the party and the chaos than anything else, but it does deliver on the party and the chaos, which is why I enjoy it so much. Our number 6 over here is Logic Chase from Haba. I love this, and it's not even a game. I debated whether to include this or not. It's not really a game so much a set of logic puzzles, but it is from Haba that makes games, so fairly or not, I'm going to include it over here. And yes, it is the only one I'm taking out over here. I don't know why, it's the only one I'm taking out. Either way, in this game, what you have, this is basically a game that's meant for 4-year-olds or older, and I can tell you from playing with my 5-year-old that he loves it, and so it's doing a good job being true to its audience. Let's go ahead and grab a card here and show you how this works. So, the basic idea is you have a logic puzzle. So for example, you're looking at this puzzle over here, and the 4-year-old has to decide, well, which piece fits into the helicopter? And there's 4 options. And you don't really tell them anything, you literally just show them the picture, and they have to figure things out. And so maybe I'm like, this piece fits into the helicopter. And I put my little dial into here. Does it go through? There we go. I put it in, great. And in order to see if I'm right, I pull up the card. And it doesn't work, because that was the wrong piece. Instead, why does it go in so hard? Instead, it's probably this piece over here. That's what I think it is. Let's see if it works. It comes up. There's a little slot over here which allows it to pull up if you guessed correctly. Now this kind of thing over here, all it is a series of, I don't even know how many there are, like 50 cards, double-sided. There's like 100 logic puzzles in this, and my son loves this. Like, he's like, I have no interest in playing it. I was like, do 2 cards. And he sat there and then did all 100 cards in like an hour. He just sat down for an hour, figuring it all out. And of course, you could just look at the answers. He didn't. He put the little thing in, he guesses, he's either right or he's wrong. He had so much fun with this. It's incredible at what it's doing for its target audience. Like, when you sit there and say, hey, we have logic puzzles that are good for 4-year-olds, I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Like, 4-year-olds seems like a challenge for a logic puzzle, but this works beautifully. There's a little bit of a puzzle, there's an answer, he had so much fun with it, and he wanted to do it again and again and again, and he went from, I don't want to play it, to, can you please get all of them? Because they do have recharge packs. There's like well, recharge packs is the wrong term, you don't really use them. They do have alternate packs. So they have different packs with different age range appropriateness that will use that same little stand, so you don't have to buy the stand each time. You just buy different packs, you slot them in over here, and you're like, great, try this puzzle because you did so well at the last batch. These are going to ramp it up a little bit for you. And so they are so satisfying to do. They're excellent at the target age range. My ranking for this one, I don't even know what to rank this over here because this isn't really a game per se, and it's not about my enjoyment, but I would say that in terms of what it's trying to do for who is trying to do it, it's a 5 out of 5. This is an amazing logic puzzle for the target audience, which I just think would be a challenging thing to do, and they knocked it out of the park. Game-wise, I'm not going to bother ranking this one, so it does get a little bit of an asterisk there, because again, my own ranking scale for games it barely applies to kids games in general, less so for kids logic puzzles, and less so when I'm just a parent watching and enabling, as opposed to even being fully engaged myself. So I'm not going to rank it as a game, because I don't know what would be fair or not fair, but I will say as far as what it's trying to do for the target audience, if the idea of logic puzzle for a 4-year-old sounds intriguing, but you don't believe in it, this is incredible at what it's doing. In any case, until next time, these are your, well, let's do a quick recap over here. These are your 6 small box game reviews over here. We have Allegra, which was a pass for me, top tier, which I like the concept and had some bumps in the road along the execution. Letter Jam, Boop, and Goodcritters are all fun in their own different ways. Letter Jam is very fun, but doesn't nail the teaching audience as well. Boop is pretty solid, but I just prefer other abstract myself, but it is a good little abstract and it's very adorable. And Goodcritters is definitely a good time. Lots of party game chaos going on there, but don't rely too much on strategy. And then ultimately, Logic Chase over here is the one that I appreciate the most, granted the least of a game on the table. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.